Hello, and welcome to this very special episode of Politics Relaxed. We have our second ever interview with Conservative Candidate Seenah Shah. So, hi, how are you?
Hi Dylan. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, I'm good, thank you. Yeah, quite excited to this interview. First of all, would you just like to explain to our listeners what you do? And yeah.
Yeah, of course. So I suppose I'm one of the younger people getting involved in politics. I'm 31, which I know is probably ancient to you now. I look back and I think, oh gosh, that is old. But look, I never really set out to get involved in politics. At university, I studied international relations with Spanish, and I thought I'm going to go and join the UN or European Parliament or something like that. And ended up in IT recruitment randomly, only because it gave me the chance to work in Germany. So I did that and then realised I don't really like recruitment very much, and started off at a really sort of at the bottom in marketing, and worked my way up. And now I am the interim head of marketing and communications for a publicly listed company in London. We own the Harland and Wolff shipyard, so I travel a lot to Northern Ireland and down to Devon as well now. And I guess my political stuff, I only got involved in that when I was about 25. So I had been president of my students' union, so I guess that was probably my first sort of touch with politics. But
Yep.
I'd met all these politicians, and I thought, gosh, you're all posh and you're all male, and that's not really me. And they'd all they'd ever done was politics. They knew everything about anything to do with politics, and that really wasn't me. I wasn't really a political geek. At the age of 25, one of my local councillors said that there was a seat coming up in the local council, and I should really put in for it.
Yep.
So that was the first time I was ever asked to stand. So I went through the selection process, and I wasn't selected. But you know what? It was a really good experience going through that whole process. And then I tried again for the following year when there was like a full out election, and that was 2000. Oh gosh, it was last year, in fact, in April, in May last year, sorry. This was the time when the Conservatives weren't very popular in the area. So the area that I sort of grew up in and live in is a Leave voting area. So they weren't very happy that we hadn't left by that point. It very much came out in the vote that was cast. So, the Conservatives really didn't do very well. And then a few months later, I went through the assessment process to be able to stand for Parliament. In September, I was selected as the candidate for Brentford and Isleworth for the Conservative Party there. And then, of course, we had an election very late last year. I got to do a really short campaign for that. And it was really exciting. And I learned lots about the local area. And I absolutely loved the experience. So hopefully I'll do it again if they let me.
Yeah, I mean, student unions a lot of the time quite a big push into politics, I'd say. I've a lot from what I know, yeah. And then
that's true. I mean, I know lots of the student union presidents that they go into the NUS as well, so the National Union of Students.
Yeah.
There is. Yeah, you're right. But then there's lots that go off and do other things as well. I think it's, I would say that anyone that goes to university, and if you're that way inclined, definitely try and stand for one of the student union positions. There's lots of different ones that you can stand for. You don't always have to be the president. There are other things to do. It's a really fantastic experience.
Yeah. Lily, do you want to go?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because you had a bit of a career in marketing, do you think that helps your political career in any way?
Do you know what? I always think that the best decisions are made when you have diversity and you need people that have different experiences. And I definitely think that having a marketing and communications background helped me with my campaign, for sure. But I think you need people with all different kinds of skill sets when you get into decision making. So when you actually look at who sat on the green benches, I think you need to have a variety of different professions, people from different backgrounds. I think that's really, really important.
I just wanted to ask a few questions about you touched on diversity and how like you wanted to include like more young women into like politics and stuff. So obviously I'm quite interested in politics, but I wouldn't say that many of my friends are, because I don't think we have that kind of I don't think that career seems as inviting to us as some other careers. So how would you like propose to introduce more young girls into politics, like in schools?
So I've sat as the chair, and I'm currently the president of Conservative Young Women. So you're very right in saying it's a real passion topic for me. And the reason is I go back to that experience that I told you about when I was president of the Students' Union. All the politicians I met were all these young men, or older men, and I'd met one woman, and I thought, no, that's not fair. We can't have men running this country for us. We have just as much of a right to have a voice and to say how things should be done as men do. And I think actually that you see the benefit of having women involved in decision making in politics. You look at all of the recent changes that have been made around domestic abuse and how they include like financial abuse and emotional abuse now. You look at things like maternity leave. Men, with the best will in the world, cannot understand what it's like to be a woman. And they see things differently from what we do, and quite rightly so. That's absolutely fine. Their experience of the world is very different from ours. And I think it's really, really important actually that, it goes back to that. You need to have that diversity. You need to have that balance in politics. You need to have different people sat around the table making decisions and thinking about things from different points of view. And I would say to every young woman out there who's thinking about getting involved in politics but not really sure how to do it, that there's a million reasons why not to get involved in it. There's a million reasons that would put you off, that there is abuse and so on that women experience much more of than men do in politics. But I would say that the benefits far outweigh the bad. And I would say, it's an opportunity to really make a mark and to make the world a better place and to make this country a better place to live in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's obviously quite a big topic going in the future, with all of these issues of inequality being raised, not only in gender but the recent Black Lives Matter protest. That's also big diversity. So Felix, do you about the Black Lives Matter?
Oh yeah, sure. What are you planning to do to continue the momentum with Black Lives Matter?
I haven't really sort of got involved in the Black Lives Matter campaign. I find myself disagreeing with a lot of the tactics that have been employed to make the point. However, I say that and I really sympathise with the fact that not enough progress had been made in America, and the police brutality in America is really poor, and it's not acceptable. And I'm glad that's finally, there's a light being shone on that now, and hopefully that does get addressed. But when I look at this country, I look at a country that, I've always felt welcome. I've always felt like it's my home. I was born and raised here. And yeah, there have been incidents where there's been racism, and you do sometimes feel like you send your CV out, and if I had a different name on the CV, would I have got more interviews? So that there is certainly some steps that we need to make in this country to be fairer. I just think the means by which we do that is through education. You have to educate people as to why diversity is a good thing. That we are all equal. We're all human beings. We all care about the same things. We all want, a roof over our head and food in our belly, and our family to be safe. We all want those same sorts of things. And I think by highlighting the things that we have in common, and I think that's the way around it. And there are certain pockets of society where you have, seen a rise of right-wing extremism. And I think the way that you combat that is through Education. Equally, I also think as well, the Black Lives Matter movement some of the things that they've come out and said, and I don't agree with you know, the rights of people of colour over the rights of white people, for example. I think, you know, tit for tat doesn't work. And I think actually saying that, yeah, you know, we need to do more to progress Black rights or people of colour's rights, but not at the detriment of saying, well, we're more important than you are, or you don't deserve a voice either. No, and it shouldn't be one person's rights over another. I think it's about equality and hearing everyone's point of view and having discussion and having open debate. And I think up until very recently, we weren't really having these discussions. You know, you had things like the Me Too movement, and it's really opened up debate. You know, the Black Lives Matter movement's really opened up debate. And I think these are really, you know, it's really, really great to see that these movements are happening and we're having these really difficult conversations. And only then can we see progress, you know, until we start talking about these things and recognizing that, you know, it's not okay. And there's lots of people that don't agree with what's happening, you know, and feel victimized by the current situation. We're not going to see progress. And that's what it's all about. It's about how do we get progress in the fairest way possible.
Yeah.
So you're saying like education is really important. Do you mean like beyond just school? Like, do you also think that education is important within like businesses and companies and things like that?
Absolutely. And I think anyone that thinks that you stop learning when you leave school is sorely mistaken. I think you have to keep learning all the way through your life. You know, there are certain ideas and beliefs that people hold that are much older because that was what was acceptable when they were younger. But it's absolutely not. And, you know, and we need to constantly be educating people on what is right. And, you know, we need to always have those debates openly. You know, we need to be able to disagree, we need to be able to agree, and we need to be able to, you know, really sort of delve into different ideas to make sure that everyone is empowered with the knowledge of what is fair and right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think we're going to move on just a little bit because I thought I'd ask more about the youth side of your job. So only 21% of 18 to 24-year-olds said they would vote Tory in the most recent poll. So I think it's a great chance here to prove that the Tories have youth issues at heart. So I based my questions around the biggest issues facing like young people. So I think I'll start with climate change because the UN said we've had 11 years to act on climate change before it's irreversible. And we're probably at the most vital time for climate change in our history. So what are the Tories doing? And if you were leader of the Tories, what would you do if you wanted to change this?
Well, I actually think that we're bringing in, you know, I think no matter which government we had right now, whether it's Labour, you know, or the Conservative Party, I think you've got the same challenges, which is our economy is completely underpinned by something that is not good for our environment, you know, this sort of mass consumerism, everyone traveling around in, you know, in vehicles that aren't good for the environment, you know, this addiction to plastic, you know, how much time we spend on our devices and so on, and the energy that's put in to spend, you know, to create the computers and the phones that we live our lives by now. You know, all of these things, I think, are a challenge to any government that we have. And I think what the Conservatives are doing are looking at and putting a lot of money into research around, you know, how do we move away from the sort of life that we have now and make it more environmentally friendly. And yes, there are going to have to be some, you know, personal sacrifices. Everyone has to make individual choices to contribute to something, you know, or, you know, for example, how do each one of us make different decisions to make sure that we're contributing to the future of this planet? And I think things like, you know, banning plastic straws, you know, increasing the tax on plastic bags, these are all great things. But ultimately, you know, there are a number of people, and I know people like this, you know, they'll happily spend whatever money on bags because they just can't be bothered to bring their own, you know, and it's individual choices. I think that the really good things that the Conservative Party or the Conservative government are doing right now is they are investing a lot in how do we move over to hydrogen. So hydrogen's obviously a more environmentally friendly fuel. It's only going to emit water rather than greenhouse gases. I think that that's a really sort of, that's something that's going to have a lot of power, but it's a lot of impact, but it's going to take some time. They are really trying to encourage industry to be greener as well. So there's a lot of grants that are going into how do you green up industry. So I can speak from a shipbuilding perspective. I know that when we met with the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago, he was really, really keen to see green shipping, at the forefront and of British shipbuilding. There's a variety of different things, but actually, I think that the biggest challenge is that you have to work with other countries, because it's all well and good that our small little island does all the great things to move to a greener way of living and working. But what about, big countries like India and China, and America, and how do you put pressure on those governments to do better? And, it's diplomatic relationships that are really important there. So I guess that's another priority as well.
Yeah, need to be a worldwide effort to make any proper change.
Yeah,
absolutely. And there's movements within the Conservative Party. So you've got there's the Conservative Environment Network. There's the action. So there's a real sort of big movement within the party, especially the young people in the party, to do more around, how do we look after animal welfare? How do we look after the planet better? So, I think those movements exist in every party.
Yeah. I'm actually personally a member of Extinction Rebellion, and I saw on a recent post on your Instagram when doing my research that you condemn them and their strategy. So what do you think the main faults of Extinction Rebellion are?
You know what? I think that initially when they first sort of did these sort of really sort of impactful action days, the really good thing about this, and it goes back to that, it opened up that debate. People are actually having that conversation, but I kind of felt like that voice had been heard. Now, and parties were scrambling over each other to do better for the environment. And I appreciate that there needs to be momentum there, but I think that there were better ways to do that. Actually some of their actions meant that ambulances couldn't get back to hospitals and people died, and that's never acceptable. And I think the level of disruption that they caused almost undermined the sympathy for their campaign. And I think it just went too far.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
well, what would you do now to make it a positive thing again, or to make it have a positive impact again?
Do you know what? I really like the fact that there were so many young people out in mass, standing up for climate change. I wish it hadn't been on a school day, I'm not going to lie. I wish it had happened on a Saturday or a Sunday, or, during school holidays or something. But I thought, that's a really, really powerful message. And it meant that things were getting discussed by our most senior politicians, I thought that was really, really clever. And I was really impressed by all the young people that felt passionate enough to do that. And I'd like to see more things like that, because it really brings it home that that's our future. Our children are our future, and we need to make sure we look after this planet for our children. For me, I suppose the environmental issue has been something that I've always been passionate about. I set up an environmental youth group when I was younger. I used to quite regularly speak out about how little local governments were doing for the environment. So for me, it's always been an important issue, and one of the things that I've always been willing to sort of pick up. What I feel really, really, really positive about is the number of additional MPs that you're seeing that find this to be an important issue. So, you've got so many MPs now that are regularly sort of standing up for the planet and recognising that more needs to be done. My local MP is Vicky Ford, and she's absolutely brilliant. So she did the Give Up Plastic for Lent, and really raised awareness of how bad plastic is. And I'd like to see more of our MPs do that kind of thing.
Yeah. So another topic that's obviously about the future and the future of young people is Brexit, which is of course going to be is a massive change. So it might seem an obvious one, but are you personally Brexit or anti-Brexit?
I voted to leave, and I stand by my decision. And I appreciate that that goes against the grain of many young people, but there are still some young people that did vote to leave. And for me, you know, I think everyone's got their personal reasons for why they voted to leave. For me, what I found really sad about the whole leave and remain debate is how divisive it has been, and how unwilling people have become to listen to the opposition's point of view and to try and understand the other person's point of view. So for me, what I'd like to see now, as we actually do leave the EU, is to see more things that bring us together and less division.
So obviously a lot of young people didn't vote to leave. So could you tell us what you think the positives are of Brexit and for young people's futures?
Yeah, so I think that by leaving the EU, we're now starting to explore free trade across the whole world and not just on our doorstep, which I think is a really positive thing. So I very much believe in international free trade. I think that having taxes on trade internationally is not always a good thing. And I think that we have more freedom now to explore those different things. Also, from the perspective of the Commonwealth, so my family originally from India, and my mum and dad were born in Kenya and moved here when they were children, and I was born here. So I always think of myself as a Commonwealth baby, and you know, I think it will be really, really nice to see some of those relationships strengthened, and for us to be doing more with our Commonwealth, not just the countries that are on our doorstep. And in terms of immigration, what I really hope to see is that immigration becomes fairer. So you'll start to see opportunities for people from anywhere in the world, not just from people within Europe. And I think what's really nice about that is that means that not everybody is just going to be white European. I think you're going to see different races, different cultures, and I'm really excited about that. I think this is a country that does multiculturalism really, really well. And I feel like that's somewhat been eroded recently, and because of the inability to open up our immigration more. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, another huge thing for our generation, and it's going to be especially as we move on, is COVID-19. The government's COVID-19 response. We had the worst death rate per capita, and the worst. That's the worst per 100,000, and the worst GDP drop in Europe so far. That's Europe for both of them. So, how do you think the government have dealt with this crisis?
So some of the statistics you've pulled, the challenge in comparing us with other countries is every country is reporting on statistics in a different way. They're using different methods to calculate their statistics. So it's really, really difficult to do country by country comparison. There have been some decisions that I personally haven't agreed with. I don't think they've got everything right, but I think they know that, and I don't think it was very easy to get everything right, given the circumstances. There's been some really great things though. We've had the Eat Out to Help Out, which it was really started to kickstart the economy again. But one of the things that I was really, really excited about was the fact that, all of a sudden you had all these people working from home and the impact that had on the environment. And what I'd like to see is how do we start to keep that momentum? How do we keep our waters green? Like we had the dolphins swimming in Venice's canals. Our greenhouse gas emissions in this country have gone down. How do we employ some of the things that we have learned during COVID-19 now, and continue to do those things, but also reestablish those meaningful sort of physical social interactions again?
Yeah, it's been a really steep and fast learning curve for the government, I think, and I think it was actually really useful for this government because it's such a challenge to start in office with this. So I think it'll be a really positive thing going forward for this government. Yeah.
There's so you hear from all sides of the argument. Some people think that they've done a good job. Some people think that they haven't. I just don't. I think until there's a review after all of this is kind of over, and you can actually properly sit down and reflect on what went wrong and what went right. I don't really feel in a position to make that kind of judgment. I mean, there's certain things for me, like, you know, the whole Dominic Cummings driving to test his eyesight stuff, you know, that there were some clear own goals there that I didn't agree with. But, you know, equally, I think there's some things that I don't know if we would have got them out of any other kind of administration. And I think this was actually a time for us to put aside party politics and think together how this country can best deal with it. It's hugely challenging, like you say. And yeah, you know, that it can only get better, I hope.
Yeah, especially with some of the like environmental things that we were talking about just a minute ago. We need to like hold on to some of these, and keep these changes. For example, this lockdown has made people discover that working from home is a lot easier than they thought it would be. So if say some companies were to keep that measure in, there'd be a lot less air pollution because of the lack of transport going around.
Yeah, I think it was such a huge change overnight that the only challenge I have with that is the social impact it's going to have on people, the mental health impact. And that's something that I don't think we'll see for a little while yet. We won't see the impact it's had on mental health for, I reckon, a couple of years at least. And that's my only concern about the whole, you know, all of a sudden everybody's working from home. You know, a lot of young people, young professionals live on their own. So they've literally been at home on their own. That kind of been very nice for them. But there's been some good things, like everyone's out exercising. You know, there was the Joe Wicks movement. Everyone's suddenly doing, like, you know, 5K runs. So there's been some really positive things. I think people are spending more time with their family. You know, I don't know how you guys sort of felt, you know, having your mums and dads at home a bit more. Like, you know, was that nice? Was it weird, like having to see them work whilst they were trying to look after you? So there's all these different things. And one of the things that I think hasn't really sort of been covered very much is there's a lot of mothers, maybe to young children, that were having to work full time and look after a child. And it did impact on them a lot. And what's been really nice is that the men have had to see how the women juggle a lot more than what they traditionally do. So it's been, you know, I think it's been eye-opening in terms of gender roles as well. I think hopefully we'll see that there's more respect for you know, the different roles everyone plays in society.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to say, leading on from like working from home, how do you think? So I also read on your page that you thought technology is like a great tool and like to utilize it a bit more. So how do you think? Because technology has obviously enabled us to stay connected, and it's been a really useful thing throughout like everywhere, schools, businesses, and everything. How do you think we can move forward by using technology in perhaps a more like sustainable or like a better way?
So I guess one of the things is that we have to green up our grid. So the way that we generate electricity has to be greener, you know. So I know that we're investing a lot in wind farms and other renewable energy at the moment. And there will be more renewable energy in the future, but it is, you know, by its nature, unreliable. It's not always going to generate the electricity that we need. And that's why we need to have hydrogen-powered energy. So I know that there's still, you know, that there's a lot of sort of gas-fired power stations, there's coal-fired power stations, and we need to move to greener fuels. So hydrogen's a real obvious win. So that when we are using our devices, we're not harming the planet. In terms of the minerals and resources that are needed, you know, I don't know how much people tend to know about phones and computer devices and so on, but you use minerals within phones and electronic devices, and those minerals have to be mined. And the challenge when you mine for those minerals is, one, it does use energy, and it's not always a good, clean energy. The other thing is the exploitation, so that, you know, what are the workers' rights like that are actually mining for these resources? Are they safe? So I think, you know, we need to have a really open conversation about how our devices made. And can we recycle our old devices? And I think that these sorts of things, you know, are hidden at the moment, and I'd like to see them spoken about a bit more.
Yeah, if I can just ask you a question about, we were talking about sources of power. It's obviously another debated topic, but nuclear power stations. Do you have any opinions on that? Like, should they be introduced into Britain or?
I personally am not a fan of nuclear energy, just because once you've got the nuclear waste, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not safe waste, and I think you're just sort of building up an inevitable problem, which is what do you do with all this nuclear waste, when you run out of space to put it in. So for me, it's not something that I'm really keen to see more of. I appreciate that there is a bit of a necessity for it. So I know that like nuclear reactors are probably a way to, a part of the future in terms of like smart cities and so on. But no, I'd rather see hydrogen and renewable energies.
Yeah. I'm going to move back onto youth stuff. It was like a week ago now. The Good Childhood Report came out, showing in the last 10 years children's happiness has decreased. I'll just read out a few of the main findings. There's been a continued decrease in average happiness of life between 10 to 15-year-olds in the UK. Happiness with friends is in the decline. 15-year-olds in the UK are among the saddest and least satisfied in Europe. And the COVID pandemic has pretty obviously affected children's happiness because of the lack of choice they had in life. These huge worries have been centered around school, friends, and physical appearance. It's a huge issue for my generation, so obviously there's no quick fix to this. But can you name some measures you would maybe bring in? And why have the government before not addressed this huge crisis?
So for me, I think that social media has a real big role to play in why teenagers in particular are unhappy. But it even goes through right to, to my age as well. People look at what they see on Instagram and it's heavily filtered and edited and think that's what beautiful looks like, and it's completely unrealistic. You've got people that refuse to take photos of themselves, selfies without filters on them, and I think that's incredibly sad. I look at old photos of myself when you took them with a proper camera, on good old days, and there were no filters, and I look at how I looked at 13, for example, and I look at how 13-year-olds look now on social media, and it's vastly different. And it's not healthy, it's not realistic, it's not healthy. And if you've got young people living their lives by how many likes they get on their photo, and I think it's created a really nasty problem, actually. And how do you address that? I mean, that's really challenging. You have to get the social media companies to step up. But also I think, it's, maybe we could do a campaign like where, everyone posts a photo of themselves without a filter. It could be a day, like, you do a filter-free day or something like that. That would be really great. So that everyone, puts a selfie up without a filter, and actually sort of poke fun at, like bad hair days. And, everyone always wakes up sometimes, and, oh gosh, what have I done to myself overnight, really bad day, bad skin day, whatever it is, and post it up. So one of the things that I did during my election campaign is did a filter-free campaign. So all of the photos that I posted and used during my campaign, none of them were edited or had filters on them. So it was a true reflection of, how rubbish I felt on that day, or if my hair was bad, it was bad in the photo. And I felt really passionate about that. I thought there's a lot of young women that will be looking at this thinking, when you're in the spotlight, you are, effectively a role model, and I wanted to be a good one.
Yeah. I think you should probably get a copyright on that one. The film. Free day, that sounds quite good, I'm going to move on to equality because we don't have too much time left.
Sure.
But by 2018, the richest fifth had income equality 12 times the amount earned by the poorest fifth. And the inequality of wealth is just increasing so much. So how are you going to combat this huge problem, again, for young people?
I mean, there's a couple of different things you can look at. One is inequality within a country. So if you look at inequality within our country, I think that I look at some of the schools that are in the most deprived part of the country, and how do we make sure that those children feel that the same opportunities are open to them as are, for children from the best private schools, for example. And that's a real challenge, and that's something that I feel really passionate about. So one of the jobs that I did in marketing, my first marketing job was with a company called My Kind of Future. They were back then called My Kind of Crowd, and I did a lot of work around opening up opportunities and I suppose mindsets for young people that were from disadvantaged backgrounds. And a lot of them, are put off going to university because they think that they're going to be in a lot of debt. And really the way that debt is constructed when you're a student, it's like a graduate tax. It's really not like having a debt. And I think it's really important that we change that perception. You have a lot of children growing up and they will have been told all their life, oh no, that's not for you, that's not for you. And I'm really, really passionate about making sure that no child feels like that's not for them. I think that every opportunity is open to every child. Anyone that's willing to work hard and apply themselves, that's open for them. That's really, really important, and something I feel super passionate about, and I think we need to do a lot more on. And I think we need to do, there's some really, really good teaching techniques and mentoring techniques that you see in private schools. And I think we need to apply them into state-funded schools as well. So, if a child in a state-funded primary school says, I want to be a footballer, they should be told exactly how they can become a footballer, not told, well, yeah, but you've got to do your maths and English just in case you don't make it. That those are really important things that we must change, and must change quickly. I think the other important issue is children that are involved in gangs and getting groomed into gangs, and making sure that we are fighting those gangs to make sure that they're not taking away our young people and their futures. I set up something called Project Legacy locally because we recognise that there were gangs grooming young people and taking away their futures. And how do you stop that from happening? And it's by, engaging those young people in more positive activities outside of school. We've got to be open about the fact that there are some children that go home and they don't have a great experience at home. And that's the reason why they end up, not having the best jobs or ending up in trouble as well. And it's really sad when you go into a young offenders institute and you hear about children where that they're almost getting congratulated for getting into prison, like suddenly you've graduated, or here's another marketing channel for our drug dealing for our family. It's really, really sad, and I think there's some real horrible things that are happening that we need to address. Inequality across the whole world, for me is when people moan about aid, I get so frustrated. If that aid is going to a country where it's genuinely going to impact the poorest, I don't have a problem with it. I disagree with some of the way that the aid is spent, but I think everyone's got different perspectives on that. For me, it's about how do we give young people across the whole world the best future? How do we give them education? How do we give them best life chances? How do we give them access to food and clean water and sanitation? Those basic things. And I find it really, really difficult when you've got people spending billions of pounds on super yachts and you've got some children that can't even get a decent meal. It's hard to reconcile that, but equally, people that work hard, it's their choice how they spend their money. And ultimately, it's up to them what they do with it. But I'd like to think that some of the richest in this world are also the most philanthropic and do contribute to some of the poorest and some of the problems that we have in this world as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's all we've got time for today. So thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you very much.
No, thanks to the three of you. It was lovely speaking with you.
And thank you to anyone listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe, and go and follow our Instagram. So thank you and goodbye.